Hi there, welcome to the Healing Migraines Naturally podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Caesar, and I am a licensed naturopathic doctor, and I help women all over the country rediscover a migraine-free life. Why do I do this? Because I used to suffer from chronic migraines myself. So I've dedicated my life to helping other women recover their health so that their body stops generating the migraines in the first place, right? Because that's really what we're looking for. We don't want to take medication. We don't want to have to take fistfuls of supplements. We just want our body to function properly and we feel good and we don't have migraines. So welcome to the podcast. If you're new here, I'm glad you're joining us. If you're returning, please give us a subscribe on whatever app you're hearing us on. Please subscribe. It really does help us quite a bit. So today I'm going to dive into a topic that has come up quite a bit recently, actually. So it's come up with a couple of my clients over the past couple weeks. And then it's also been a question that's been asked a couple times in my free Facebook group, Healing Migraines Naturally with Leslie Caesar ND. Feel free to join us over there on Facebook too. It's a free Facebook group with over 12,000 women now who want answers for their chronic migraines. The question that's come up several times is, why am I getting all of this nasal congestion with my migraines? So I was like, let's dive into this on the podcast. Okay, so this is a very, very common symptom for migraine sufferers. And so let's walk through, because there's several different ways that this symptom is going to manifest. So one way that nasal congestion manifests amongst migraine sufferers is the classic sinus pain. We have done a dedicated podcast to this topic. We'll link to it in the show notes. But a very common migraine symptom is pain in the sinuses. You know, our sinuses are here under the eyes, over the eyebrow. It's a classic location where people will feel pain when they have a migraine. It can be a very heavy pain. Another common location right here, you know, where your nose meets your forehead, right? So it's like there's a heavy weight. Some people have said, you know, it feels like an elephant is sitting right on the top of my nose there, right? So it's usually a heavy type pain that people will experience in that sinus area. And then with that, they get a lot of congestion, right? It's like, oh, now I'm all stopped up, right? I can't breathe through my nose. I got all this nasal discharge. What's going on here? So a lot of chronic migraine sufferers, they will actually be misdiagnosed with sinus infections. So this is more common than you'd think because the migraine pain itself is occurring in the sinus area, and then they're having nasal congestion on top of that. You know, it's not irrational to think, do I have a sinus infection? Do I have a cold? You know, what's going on here? And eventually, because this is recurring, it leads them into the ENT office, the ear, nose, throat doctor's office, or they might go to urgent care, right? Hi there. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client, Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month. And as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work. She's on top of her career again and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes. And on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. So if you go into an urgent care and you say, I have all this pain here, congestion, they're going to give you an antibiotic under the assumption that you have a sinus infection. You start taking the antibiotic. Well, in a couple days, you start to feel better. The sinus pain goes away. Well, if you think you have a sinus infection, you're going to attribute that improvement to the antibiotics, right? Whereas if you have a migraine, that migraine's going to go away eventually, and that sinus pain is going to go away. So it can be very confusing for people because people, again, they're attributing the antibiotic to solving the problem, which the assumption was a sinus infection. Pain goes away after I start the antibiotic. It reinforces, oh yeah, okay, it must have been a sinus infection, right? That must have been what was going on here. So it kind of reinforces it that it was in fact a sinus infection. So then what happens over time, oh, okay, whoop, now it's back. Now I'm back at urgent care, another round of antibiotics. I've had clients where they have this type of migraine pain where it's really focused in the sinus area, and they've been on, 10 rounds of antibiotics in a 2-year period of time, right? And so with those repeated urgent care visits, then that's going to lead people into the ENT office, the ear, nose, and throat doctor's office, and then they're getting, scopes, right? A little camera up their nose, right? They're getting the full workup. And then lo and behold, the ENT says, well, there's no inflammation in here. I don't see any signs of a chronic infection, right? And so then that starts people to wonder, okay, what's actually going on here? And many times it's the ENT doctor that will diagnose someone with migraines after they've been through all of these rounds of antibiotics and having the assumption that they are having recurring sinus infections. They finally get into the ENT, they get the full workup done, and the ENT says, no, I don't think this is, there's no inflammation here in the sinuses. I think you're having migraines. So this is a very common way that migraine sufferers will have nasal congestion. It is assumed that it's a sinus infection. So another common migraine symptom is just the nose getting blocked or the nose generating a lot of discharge, okay, we call it, mucus, and then the nose starts to run. So in this case, it's usually a very clear discharge, almost like a water. And so people will say, before my migraine or during my migraine, it's like my nose, it's like a faucet, right? It's just dripping. I'm trying to eat and my nose is just dripping this clear water-like discharge all the time. And I've started to realize that this gets worse when I have a migraine. Or it can get to the point where it totally stuffs up the nose, right? And then it kind of locks up and it's like I can't breathe out of one side of my nose and my nostrils blocked, etc. So that type of nasal congestion is also very common. As a general symptom, a lot of people, even people that don't suffer from migraines, but certainly this can also occur with chronic migraine sufferers, is even there's just this general constant nasal drip discharge. And again, this is usually like a clear, it's almost like a water that's just continuously dripping out of the nose. And so a lot of Americans have this symptom and, they don't really know what to make of it. And then also migraine sufferers can have this symptom. So they may not be in an actual migraine flare, but their nose is just kind of continuously dripping this water-like discharge. It's very common, if it's not continuous, it's very common for this type of watery nasal discharge to kick in, kind of pick up, when people are eating. So people will say, just I'm fine, I'm not stuffed up at all, but as soon as I sit down to eat, here comes the nose, right? The other thing that would generate nasal congestion and discharge, allergies, right? Classic allergy situation. So you can think of seasonal allergies. So for me personally, I used to have horrible springtime seasonal allergies. So as soon as the grass starts to green up and the trees start to bloom and so on in May in the Chicago area where I grew up, I would just have insanity level seasonal allergies. It got to the point by the time I was in high school that I would have these like spontaneous nosebleeds when I would be sitting in class in high school. My nose would just start gushing blood. That's how irritated and inflamed my nostrils were. So by the time I was in high school, I was taken to the allergist and I was given allergy shots. And I remember jabbing those needles into my thigh once a month at home. So seasonal allergies, this is a very, very common symptom that migraine sufferers will also experience, right? And so, depending on what we're sensitive to, I was particularly sensitive to those springtime pollens and grasses and so on. Other people are more sensitive to what we call more like ragweed type allergies that are more prominent like in August and September. But there's a seasonal component to it. And then we have allergies that could afflict people year round, maybe like a dog allergy or a cat allergy or, a dust mite allergy. Those are things that if you have a cat, you're going to be exposed to that year round. It's not going to have a seasonal component. And so allergies, right? It's a classic symptom that generates that nasal congestion and that discharge. Very common amongst us who are prone to migraines. So, reviewing all of those different types of nasal discharge, what is actually going on here? Okay, why is the body generating all of these different types of nasal congestion and discharge? So let me break this down for you. So there are 3 things that our body needs to maintain its state of health or bring itself back into a state of health if it's kind of fallen out of balance. Okay, and I talk about these things on the podcast. I call these things the 3 principles. Okay, so the first principle is that we have to get the nutrients that our cells need to our cells. Okay, so our cells are not going to function optimally if they don't have the nutrients that they need to do their work. Okay. The second principle is we have to clear metabolic waste material from the cells. So when our cells get the nutrients that they need to function and then they do their work, they generate metabolic waste materials. You could call these toxins, okay? These have to be removed from the cell and ultimately from the body. Things are not going to function properly if there's a bunch of trash laying all over the place, okay? We got to get the trash out. And then the third principle is we have to restore our resiliency and vitality. At the cellular level, this refers to the literal cellular voltage within the cell. So if we don't have enough cellular voltage or cellular energy, which they have been able to measure, if we don't have enough cellular energy, things are not going to function optimally, right? If I only have 50% of the electricity traveling down the wire to my lamp, then when I turn the lamp on, the bulb is not going to burn as bright as if I had 100% of the electricity going down the wire. Okay, so these 3 things are what our body needs to function properly. When our body is functioning properly, we are in a state of health and we are not experiencing what we call symptoms, okay? These unpleasant things. Those are symptoms, but they're a symptom that our body doesn't have what it needs to function optimally. So how does this tie into nasal congestion? While these 3 principles are at play within every cell of our body, some symptoms correlate more to one principle than another. Okay, so there are some symptoms that are generated in particular when there's an overload of waste material within the body. Okay, just like there are some symptoms that the body generates that are more tied to difficulty getting the nutrients out of the food that we're eating and to the cells. You can look at every symptom and say, yeah, well, that symptom is being generated because there's something kind of deficient or blocked or missing within these three principles. There are some symptoms that point to one of these principles over the other. If I have the symptom of heartburn, that is a symptom that indicates that my digestion is not functioning properly. I've got a problem within the stomach. Maybe it's a problem with adequate hydrochloric acid production. Maybe the sphincter between my esophagus and my stomach isn't closing properly. But if I have heartburn, that's a clue that there's a problem with my digestive function. And if I have a problem with my digestive function, then I'm not going to be optimally getting the nutrients out of my food. And if I can't do that, I'm not going to be able to get them optimally delivered to my cells. Okay, so while the symptom of heartburn is being generated because, let's say your stomach isn't making enough hydrochloric acid in this case, okay, so in order to make hydrochloric acid, you've got to have nutrients to make that acid. So if there's a deficiency of those nutrients in the cells of the stomach that make hydrochloric acid, you're going to have difficulty making enough hydrochloric acid, right? If there's a bunch of trash laying around those cells that make hydrochloric acid in the stomach, they're going to have a hard time making the hydrochloric acid. You can't run a factory with a bunch of trash all over the floor. And if there's diminished cellular energy or voltage within those cells, they're not going to pump out the hydrochloric acid as fast as they could, right? So yes, these three principles are at play all the time with all symptoms, but certain symptoms are going to indicate more specific blockers, right? So again, if I can't make the hydrochloric acid properly, I'm not going to be able to break my food down as well as I could. I'm not going to be able to absorb those nutrients. If I don't absorb those nutrients, I can't get them to my cells, right? So heartburn is a symptom that's particularly characteristic within the first principle. There's a whole host of symptoms that are particularly characteristic that indicate that there's an overload of waste materials and toxins in the body. You could call these toxicity symptoms. So these are the symptoms that the body generally will generate when there's an overload of waste materials and toxins. Now, which ones is my body going to generate versus which ones are your body going to generate? That depends. There's a genetic component to that. We all are prone to different symptoms, but the symptoms are not random. When you understand the underlying physiology and biochemistry of different symptoms, you can start to put these patterns together and you can start to identify what symptoms indicate, okay, yeah, this is heavier within the first principle or heavier within the second principle or the third principle. So nasal congestion is a toxicity symptom, okay? And this is what most people don't understand. It's certainly, when I was in high school, right, and my parents certainly didn't understand this. The allergists they took me to certainly didn't understand this. I certainly didn't understand this. We are not taught this information. We don't look at symptoms with this framework, right? And that's why, unfortunately, so many Americans are suffering as much as they are with all kinds of chronic illnesses and all of the symptoms that they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. But any sort of nasal congestion, nasal discharge, it's a toxicity symptom when it's chronic, right? You could get a virus in your sinus cavity and you can have a viral infection within your sinuses, right? I'm not talking about acute illnesses. There's sort of a different framework for analyzing that. But the chronic symptoms that people experience, okay? Any sort of nasal congestion, it's highly, highly likely that that's pointing to a toxin overload or a metabolic waste material overload within the body. So why would that be the case? So our body is always trying to function properly, okay? I know if you're listening to this, you're probably struggling with migraines and it feels like your body hates you and there's something defective and broken, right? Your body does not hate you, okay? Your body is continuously trying to function optimally or as well as it can in the environment that it finds itself in. And so in the intracellular environment that's inside your body, if there's a overload of metabolic waste material and toxins, the body wants to get those out, okay? They irritate the body. They sort of damage the body. These toxin molecules, they're under the category of free radical molecules. A lot of people have heard about free radical molecules. Oh, those are bad. Those kind of injure things. Yes, our body has to get these toxin molecules out. Your liver is the main organ that is doing the work of what is called detoxifying these toxin molecules. And this is, we know a lot about this process from a biochemical standpoint. You can open up any biochemistry textbook, physiology textbook, and read about what we know about what are called detoxification pathways that are in the liver and other cells in the body, but the liver is the main organ of detoxification, which is a physiological process in the body. So if your liver can't keep up with the load, your liver has a certain capacity. If it can't keep up, your body starts to do is say, okay, how could I help my liver out, right? How else can I get rid of these toxin molecules? Well, I could put them in a discharge. If I generate a discharge, I can flush them out. Where can we make a discharge? Well, one of the areas is within the sinuses, the nasal cavity. We experience, right, this really irritating and annoying phenomenon where our nose is getting stuffed, it's starting to drip. An extreme manifestation is we actually have pain, heavy pressure pain within the sinuses. And we're thinking it's my immune system. This is what people usually think. Why is my immune system generating this? Do I have a cold? I don't think I have a cold. I don't feel like I have a cold. Why is my immune system doing this? We're kind of blaming the immune system. Somehow my immune system is defective. With allergies, right, it's sort of like, well, why is my immune system reacting to this grass that's starting to green up here? It's like defective. It's confused, it's broken, my immune system is rogue. That's how we kind of think of allergies. Same thing with recurring sinus infections. We're thinking that there's a virus. How do I keep getting this virus? How do I keep getting this bacteria? No one else is getting these infections, but I keep getting these infections, right? This dripping, watery nasal discharge. Why am I sitting down to eat something and then my nose starts dripping, right? It's a big mystery to everyone. Well, if we're overloaded with waste material and toxins and our liver can't keep up, yes, our immune system is going to jump in and help out and generate a discharge. And then I can put those toxin molecules in that discharge, and then it's going to come out of my body. It's going to drip out of my nose literally, or I'm going to blow it out into a Kleenex, right? If there's a big overload, then it's like, okay, I got to generate even more of a discharge, and then it can get stopped. We can have so much inflammation. This is where inflammation, it's kind of considered to be, something negative, something bad, something that we're always fighting within the body. But the body has to generate inflammation to do specific things that are necessary, okay? So the body will be generating inflammation within the nasal cavity, within the sinuses, to produce this discharge that's going to benefit the body. But again, if I'm like, okay, we really got a big problem here, I need to generate a lot of inflammation, we need a lot of discharge here, it can get overzealous and then we're completely stopped up. This is why migraine sufferers are particularly prone to this, because the migraines themselves are also a toxicity symptom, okay? On an upcoming podcast, I'm going to go into this, a really deep dive into this. But just for the purposes of this podcast here, just know that migraines and headaches are a major toxicity symptom. Hi there. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month, and as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has two small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work, she's on top of her career again, and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes, and on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. So the takeaway that I want you to have here is that all of this nasal discharge that you're experiencing, it's not a confusion on your body's part. There isn't something, defective or broken happening here. It's your body trying to flush out these toxins that your liver can't get to. So what do we do typically when we have a nasal discharge? We try to make it go away. Right? We've got the Afrin, we've got the, natural nasal sprays, we've got the Allegra, we've got the Benadryl, we've got decongestant medication that you now have to get, behind the glass at the pharmacy, right? So whenever we have this nasal discharge, we want it to go away as fast as possible because your nose is dripping all the time, you're trying to talk, you're trying to eat, right? So of course, you're going to reach for something to stop it up. Right, to make it go away. But what if it's beneficial, right? What if it's something that your body is doing to try to ultimately help you? I know it's annoying at the time, but if I've got an overload of toxins, my body wants those out of here, right? I'm going to feel a lot better without those in my body. And so going through the discomfort of the nasal discharge, of the allergies, right? That ultimately is going to be for our benefit because we're eliminating these toxin molecules from our body while we're doing it. Okay, so this is sort of the problem with our medical model and how we view symptoms, right? We're always viewing symptoms through a lens of there's something defective and broken going on here that I need to stop, right? I need to take something to suppress what's going on here. When most of the what we call symptoms, not all, but most of the symptoms that we experience, the things that we call symptoms, are actually adaptations that our body is using to try to keep us functioning as best as it can in the environment that it finds itself in, right? So again, I'm talking in this case about the internal cellular environment that it's in. If there's an overload of waste material in that environment, our body is going to try to do the best that it can, and it's going to try to lower that load. Okay, so I hope this is, a few light bulbs are going on for you here again, because I'm sure a lot of you listening have had, the allergy history, the sinus history. Why would these symptoms come on in particular when we have a migraine? So again, a migraine or a headache, it's a major toxicity symptom. There are toxicity symptoms that you might call kind of minor toxicity symptoms that start to pop up when the overall load within the body is relatively low. Unfortunately, by the time we're getting, chronic headaches, migraines, that toxin load has risen to quite a level. But particularly with that migraine flare itself, it's almost like that, trash can got knocked over and all the trash is spilled out all over the floor. It's sort of like an acute toxin spill. And so when that happens, our body is going to try to do everything it can to clean up the mess. And so it's like, okay, let me get all this trash out of here. I'm really going to start to ramp up this congestion, this runny nose, this inflammation here. So I hope this was helpful to you. Let me know in the comments what questions you have for me, or, really what would be ideal is for you to join our free Facebook group. Again, that's Healing Migraines Naturally with Leslie Caesar, ND. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. And then you can ask me questions right there in the Facebook group in more of a private forum than public comments on YouTube or Spotify. So very good. Thanks for joining. Again, if you like this information, please subscribe. It really does help us out. And of course, if you have a friend or a family member that you think would benefit from this information, is really struggling with allergies or something like that, and they don't have migraines, still send them this information, okay? A lot of people are not feeling well that don't have migraines, okay? And so we're really trying to get this information out here and really trying to help people understand what's going on within their body and give them a better explanation for why they're not feeling well than just your body's defective and stupid and doesn't know what it's doing. So take this to try to stop it. So very good. Thanks so much for joining me today, and we will talk to you soon.